Part 1. The Calloused Hands.
I murdered the only person who ever truly loved me.
My name is Arthur. I am a very wealthy, famous surgeon. I live in a massive mansion with my beautiful, rich wife. My life looks absolutely perfect to the outside world. But my entire existence is built on a terrible lie. I grew up in a very poor, dirty town. My older sister, Nora, raised me after our parents died. She was a brilliant student with a bright future. But she dropped out of high school. She went to work in a dark, noisy clothing factory to pay for my food. She worked 16 hours a day, sitting at a cheap sewing machine. She ruined her hands sewing cheap shirts. Her fingers became permanently scarred, rough, and covered in thick calluses. She sacrificed her youth, her beauty, and her dreams. She gave me everything so I could go to medical school. I took her money and became a highly successful doctor. But instead of feeling grateful, I felt deeply ashamed of her. I started spending time with wealthy doctors and rich politicians. Nora was poor, uneducated, and wore cheap clothes. I did not want my new friends to see her rough hands. I slowly stopped calling her. I ignored her messages. I did not even invite her to my expensive, high-class wedding. I completely erased my sister from my life to protect my fake, wealthy image. I thought my perfect, golden world was completely secure and untouchable. I was entirely wrong. A few months ago, a heavy, dark envelope arrived at my mansion. The return address belonged to Nora. I did not open it. I threw it directly into the burning fireplace, feeling annoyed by her desperate attempt to contact me. I burned her words without a single second of hesitation. That was the first terrible mistake. While I was ignoring my sister, a dark shadow was quietly destroying my medical career. I was secretly under investigation by the state medical board. I had made a careless, arrogant mistake during a previous surgery. A wealthy patient had died because of me. The board was preparing a massive legal case against me. They were going to take away my medical license permanently. I was going to lose my hospital job, my money, and my proud reputation. My rich wife threatened to leave me if I lost my status. I was completely desperate. I sat in my large, expensive office every night, drinking heavy glasses of whiskey. I needed a miracle to save my career. I needed to do something incredibly heroic to prove my value to the hospital directors. I needed to change the public narrative before the board officially fired me. I was looking for a way to save my own selfish life. I did not know my miracle was already waiting for me in the dark. I did not know the universe was preparing to teach me the most painful, devastating lesson a human being could ever experience. Part 2. The Nameless Patient.
The chief director of the hospital called me into his large office.
He knew about my secret medical board investigation.
He looked at me with cold, disappointed eyes. He told me the hospital's reputation was in massive danger because of my careless surgical mistake. He demanded an immediate public relations victory. The director threw a thin medical file onto his desk. He ordered me to perform a highly complex, dangerous surgery on a new charity patient. The hospital wanted to invite reporters to cover the story. They wanted to show the world that their top surgeon was a kind, generous hero.
I hated charity cases.
They did not pay well, and they offered zero prestige among my wealthy friends.
But I had absolutely no choice.
If I refused, the director would hand me over to the medical board immediately.
I picked up the file with a deep, arrogant sigh of frustration. I opened the file to check the patient's details. The first twist surprised me. The name section was completely blank. She was registered as a Jane Doe. The nurses explained that she arrived alone, carrying no identification. She refused to give her name until the surgery was completely finished. The medical charts were absolutely horrific. The nameless woman was suffering from stage 4, terminal cancer. The disease had spread aggressively through her internal organs. The proposed surgery was not a cure. It was a highly risky palliative procedure just to reduce her terrible daily pain. I walked down the bright hallway to her hospital room. I wanted to meet this nameless beggar who was wasting my valuable time. I opened the door and looked at the hospital bed. The sight made me feel physically uncomfortable. The patient looked like a fragile, broken skeleton. She was completely bald due to cheap, aggressive chemotherapy treatments. Her skin was pale yellow and stretched tightly over her visible bones. She wore a cheap oxygen mask over her face. Her eyes were closed, and she was breathing very weakly. I felt absolutely no compassion for her at all. I just wanted to finish the surgery, take the press photos, and save my career. The second twist annoyed me deeply. A nurse whispered that this nameless, dying woman had specifically requested me. She demanded that Dr. Arthur perform the surgery. She refused to let anyone else touch her body. I laughed a cold, arrogant laugh. I assumed she had simply seen my face on a hospital billboard. I thought she was just a desperate, poor woman begging for a famous savior. I did not look closely at her face. I did not recognize the shape of her closed eyes. I signed the surgical approval forms quickly. I told the nurses to prepare the operating room for the next morning. I walked away from the fragile skeleton in the bed, thinking only about my upcoming hearing. The ultimate tragedy was officially set into motion, and I was completely blind. Part 3. The routine surgery. The operating room was freezing cold and perfectly bright. The loud, steady beeping of the heart monitor echoed in the sterile air. I washed my hands carefully, feeling incredibly stressed. My mind was not focused on the fragile patient. I was obsessing over the medical board investigation. The nurses brought the nameless woman into the room. She was already unconscious under heavy anesthesia. A green surgical cloth covered her face and her fragile body. Only a small square of her pale stomach was visible. I put on my gloves and stepped up to the bright operating table. I reached out to adjust the green cloth near her side. My gloved fingers brushed against the patient's resting hand. The first strange twist caught my attention. Her hand fell outside the blanket. I looked down at her fingers. They were incredibly rough, scarred, and covered in thick, hard calluses. The tips of her fingers were marked with hundreds of tiny, faded white scars. They looked exactly like deep needle pricks from a sewing machine. A sudden, sharp memory flashed in my brain. I remembered a dark factory and a young woman bleeding onto cheap fabric. I remembered Nora. My heart skipped a nervous beat. I stared at the rough, calloused hand on the metal table. But my massive, toxic ego immediately rejected the impossible thought. Nora was miles away in a dirty town. She would never come to this expensive hospital. This was just a random, poor factory worker. I pushed the rough hand back under the green blanket. I asked the nurse for the sharp silver scalpel. I made the first long incision across her pale stomach. The damage inside her body was catastrophic. The dark, aggressive cancer was wrapped tightly around every major blood vessel. I sighed loudly in pure annoyance. The surgery was going to take hours. The cancer was far worse than the medical scans predicted. I started working quickly, cutting away the dead tissue. I was rushing the procedure. I just wanted to finish the job and look good for the waiting cameras. The second twist hit suddenly. Before I even reached the main tumor, the heart monitor began to beep frantically. The patient's blood pressure dropped incredibly fast. The anesthesiologist shouted a loud warning. The frail woman's body was reacting terribly to the physical trauma of the surgery. She was failing. I did not feel a rush of protective compassion. I felt a surge of selfish anger. If this nameless beggar died on my table, the press would destroy me. It would be my second fatal failure. The medical board would instantly end my career. I could not let her die today. I barked harsh orders at the surgical team. I demanded more blood bags and stronger medications. I pushed my hands deeper into her chest cavity, desperately trying to stabilize the surrounding organs. I was working with arrogant, reckless speed. My panic was completely selfish, and it caused the ultimate disaster. Part 4. The Fatal Mistake. The bright operating lights blinded me as sweat dripped down my forehead. The heart monitor beeped with a terrifying, rapid rhythm. The patient was crashing quickly. I needed to remove a section of the tumor to release the pressure on her main artery. I worked with aggressive, impatient speed. I pushed the silver scalpel deep into the dark tissue. I did not double-check the surrounding area. I was too arrogant to slow down. The first horrific twist happened in a fraction of a second. My hand slipped slightly. The sharp blade cut through the tumor, but it went too far. I accidentally sliced directly through a minor, but highly pressurized, blood vessel hidden behind the cancer. Bright red blood instantly flooded the surgical field. The small, deep cut released a massive, uncontrollable hemorrhage. The green surgical cloths turned completely dark red in a matter of seconds. I froze in terror. "Clamp it," I shouted frantically at the nurses. "Give me the suction immediately." I pushed my hands into the warm blood, desperately trying to find the tiny, broken vessel. But the cancer made the tissue too thick and confusing. I could not see clearly. The blood was flowing far too fast. The second devastating twist echoed through the cold room. The rapid beeping of the heart monitor suddenly stopped. A long, flat, endless tone filled the air. The patient's heart stopped completely. She had lost too much blood. The fragile, nameless woman flatlined directly under my shaking hands. I started aggressive chest compressions. I shocked her frail chest with the heavy defibrillator paddles again and again. "Clear," I shouted desperately. The electric shocks made her thin body jump on the metal table, but the monitor remained a flat, silent green line. She was entirely, permanently gone. I stepped back from the table, my surgical gown covered in her dark blood. I did not feel any sorrow for the dead woman. I felt a massive wave of pure, selfish relief. The patient was already dying from terminal cancer. Her death was inevitable. The board could not blame me entirely. I looked at the silent nurses. "Note the time of death," I ordered with a cold, professional voice. "Record that the advanced cancer caused a sudden, unavoidable vascular collapse." I deliberately covered up my careless mistake. I blamed the disease to protect my own fragile reputation.
The nurses nodded silently. I pulled off my bloody gloves and threw them into the trash bin. I walked out of the operating room without looking back at the body. I had failed the charity surgery, but I had a perfect excuse. I survived the crisis. I walked toward my office, completely unaware of the approaching apocalypse. Part 5. The Death Certificate. I walked into my large, luxurious office and locked the heavy wooden door. I poured myself a thick glass of expensive whiskey. I drank it quickly to calm my shaking nerves. The cover-up was completely successful. The surgical notes blamed the cancer. My career was safe for another day. I sat at my expensive mahogany desk. A nurse knocked quietly and entered the room. She placed the official death certificate file on my desk. "You need to sign the final paperwork, doctor," she whispered respectfully. The patient's personal belongings arrived from the reception desk. Her real identity is inside. The nurse left the room quietly. I pulled out my expensive gold pen. I flipped open the thick medical file to write the cause of death. I casually moved my eyes to the top of the page to read the patient's real name. The first mind-shattering twist hit me instantly. The name printed in bold black letters was Nora Vance. The whiskey glass slipped from my hand, shattering loudly against the wooden floor. I stopped breathing completely. The nameless charity patient on the operating table was my older sister. I had just murdered my own blood. My vision blurred violently. The rough, calloused hand on the green blanket flashed in my mind. It was her hand. The hand that worked 16 hours a day to feed me. The hand that sewed cheap shirts to pay for my medical school. I cut her open and watched her bleed to death. I fell out of my leather chair, grasping my chest. I crawled toward the small plastic bag containing her personal belongings. My trembling hands ripped the bag open. The second terrible twist fell onto the floor. It was a small, folded piece of white paper. It was a note addressed to me. I unfolded the paper with bloody, shaking fingers. Her handwriting was weak and messy. "Arthur, I transferred to your hospital today. I know you will be my surgeon. I know I am dying. Do not be afraid. I trust your hands more than anyone else in the world. I love you." She did not come to beg for money. She came to be cured by the brilliant brother she sacrificed her life to build. She trusted me completely. And I was so annoyed, so arrogant, and so selfish that I did not even look at her face. I slaughtered her like an animal. I screamed. A loud, agonizing, animalistic scream tore through my throat. I pounded my fists against the hard floor until my knuckles bled. The golden world I built was instantly crushed into dust. I was a monster. I was a butcher. And the nightmare was only just beginning. Part 6. The Lawyer's Visit. I lay on the floor of my office, sobbing uncontrollably. The heavy weight of my terrible crime crushed my lungs. A sharp knock on the wooden door interrupted my mental breakdown. An older man wearing a sharp gray suit walked into the room. He carried a thick leather briefcase. "Are you Dr. Arthur Vance?" the man asked with a calm, professional voice. I nodded weakly from the floor, wiping my tears. "I am the legal executor for the estate of Nora Vance," he explained quietly. "She instructed me to deliver these documents to you immediately after her surgical passing." I stood up slowly, completely confused. How did her lawyer know she was going to die today? The first twist hit me like a cold wave. The lawyer opened his briefcase.
Nora knew the surgery would not cure her, Arthur. She was in terminal stage 4. She was fully aware it was a death sentence. If she knew she was going to die, why did she demand the surgery? I asked, my voice completely broken. The lawyer looked at me with deep, profound pity. The massive, reality-destroying super twist finally emerged from the leather briefcase. The lawyer handed me her official, certified final will. She did not come here for a cure, the lawyer stated softly. She came here to die on your specific operating table. Nora knew about your secret malpractice investigation, Arthur. She knew you were going to lose your medical license and your entire career. She decided to save you one last time. I stared at the legal documents in absolute horror. The will clearly stated that upon her death at this hospital, Nora voluntarily donated every single healthy organ in her body. Furthermore, she donated her entire life savings, every penny she earned at the factory, to the hospital's charity wing. But the most devastating detail was written in bold ink. All the donations, the organs, and the money were legally registered in my name. She designed the entire process to look like I had successfully convinced a terminal patient to make a massive, historic charitable contribution to the hospital. She orchestrated her own death as a massive public relations stunt. She knew the hospital directors cared only about money and good press. She deliberately gave them a massive financial gift and a heroic organ donation story, legally forcing them to credit me as the brilliant architect of the charity. She used her final breath to buy my innocence. She used her dying body to build a permanent shield around my career, ensuring the board would drop the investigation. She sacrificed her life to fix the mistakes of the arrogant, ungrateful brother who abandoned her. My soul completely shattered into dust. Part 7. The Thread of Sacrifice. The lawyer left the office quietly, leaving me entirely alone with the heavy legal documents. Underneath the official will, I found a small, worn leather journal. The cover was damaged by years of use. It was Nora's private diary. I opened the pages with shaking, numb fingers. The diary documented her entire life after I left for medical school. The first twist broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. I read about her grueling daily schedule. She worked the day shift at the clothing factory, washed dishes at a restaurant at night, and cleaned floors on the weekends. She ate leftover, half-rotten food from the restaurant to save every single penny. She suffered from severe back pain and bleeding hands. But she never bought medicine for herself. She sent all her money directly to my university bank account. She literally traded her physical flesh to buy my textbooks. I never stopped loving him. She wrote in neat, careful letters. Even when he stopped calling me, I knew he was just busy saving lives. He is a great man. I am just a simple factory worker. I understand why he is embarrassed. I am just proud to watch him shine. She never felt angry or bitter about my cruel abandonment. She accepted my disgust with pure, unconditional love. I turned to a page dated exactly 3 years ago. It was the date of my lavish, expensive high society wedding. I explicitly banned her from attending the beautiful ceremony. The second devastating twist was written on that page. I stood across the street from the grand church today. She wrote, her words stained with dried tears. It was raining heavily, but I saw Arthur walk out in his beautiful tuxedo. He looked like a handsome prince. I was so incredibly happy. She stood in the freezing rain, hiding behind a tree, just to watch me marry my rich wife. She did not want to ruin my perfect pictures with her cheap clothes. I snuck inside the reception hall later. She continued. I left a small gift on the silver table. My breath caught painfully in my throat. I remembered that gift. It was a very expensive, solid gold watch. It had no name card attached. I always arrogantly assumed it was a gift from a wealthy hospital investor. I wore it proudly every single day to show off my status. I looked down at my wrist. The heavy gold watch was currently ticking against my skin. Nora had saved her money for 10 years to buy me a wedding gift I would actually wear. She gave me gold, and I gave her absolute silence. I was the most disgusting creature on earth. Part 8. The Weight of Gold. The next morning, the hospital directors held an emergency board meeting. I walked into the large conference room feeling like a dead man. I expected them to fire me immediately. I expected the police to arrest me for surgical negligence. I sat in the leather chair, ready for my punishment. The chief director stood up. He did not look angry. He smiled a massive, greedy smile. The first shocking twist unfolded perfectly, exactly as Nora had planned. The director praised my incredible, heroic work. The local newspapers were already printing the beautiful story of the massive charity donation. Arthur, you are a miracle worker, the director said proudly. Because of your patient's incredible organ donation, we saved 5 lives last night. And her financial gift will build a new children's wing in your name. The board has officially voted to drop all previous investigations against you permanently. I was completely cleared. My career was totally safe. My reputation was transformed from a careless surgeon into a compassionate, brilliant saint. I walked out of the meeting completely numb. I drove back to my massive mansion. My rich wife was waiting in the living room, holding a newspaper. She ran to me and hugged me tightly. The second sickening twist was her reaction. I am so proud of you, Arthur. She cheered, pointing to my picture on the front page. Our social status is higher than ever. The governor just invited us to his private dinner party tonight. She did not ask about the woman who died. She did not care about the human life that was lost on the table. She only cared about the bright cameras and the wealthy invitations. I looked around my massive, beautiful mansion. The expensive paintings, the crystal chandeliers, the silk curtains. I suddenly realized the terrifying truth about my perfect life. Every single luxury I owned was bought with Nora's blood. My medical degree was paid for by her ruined, bleeding hands. My clean legal record was purchased with her dead organs. My golden watch was bought with her starvation. I was not a self-made genius. I was a parasite. I had built a glorious, shining throne on top of my sister's crushed, broken bones. The weight of the gold watch on my wrist suddenly felt like a heavy iron chain. I pushed my wife away and ran out of the house. Part 9. The Hidden Truth. I drove back to the hospital like a madman. I could not sleep. I could not breathe. I took the private elevator down to the freezing, quiet basement. I walked into the dark morgue. I needed to see her face one last time. I needed to beg for an impossible forgiveness. I found the cold steel drawer with her name on it. I pulled it open slowly. Nora looked incredibly peaceful. The pain of the cancer was finally gone. I reached out and gently held her cold, rough, calloused hands. I fell to my knees, sobbing loudly against the steel table. I am so sorry, Nora. I cried, kissing her scarred fingers. I am a monster. Please forgive me. A heavy silence filled the freezing room. Suddenly, the morgue door opened. The chief coroner walked in, holding a clipboard. He looked confused and deeply unsettled when he saw me crying. Arthur, there is something very strange about the autopsy report, the coroner said softly. The first twist grabbed my attention. The coroner showed me the blood analysis from the surgery. She had a rare genetic anomaly. Her body metabolized the initial anesthesia far too quickly. My heart pounded against my ribs. What does that mean? I asked, my voice shaking. The coroner looked at me with wide, horrified eyes. The haunting, reality-shattering super twist was finally revealed in the cold light. It means she was not fully unconscious during the first 10 minutes of the surgery. She was completely awake. The coroner whispered. The paralytic drugs kept her from moving, but her nervous system was active. When your scalpel slipped and cut that major blood vessel, she felt the pain entirely. She knew she was bleeding to death on the table. My mind completely broke. If she was awake, why didn't her heart rate spike in panic? Why didn't she try to alert the nurses? I stared at the coroner in absolute terror. The coroner sighed heavily. She intentionally suppressed her own panic response. She controlled her breathing to stay quiet. Nora felt my blade slip. She felt the warm blood leaving her fragile body. She knew I had made a fatal mistake that would kill her. But she did not fight for her life. She did not want to embarrass me or cause a surgical panic. She wanted the plan to succeed. She let me make the mistake. She chose to die quickly and quietly on my table. She knew a rapid death would ensure her organs remained viable for the immediate donation. She accepted the agonizing pain of a fatal cut in total silence, just to finalize my heroic status faster. Part 10. The Golden Cage. The coroner's words echoed endlessly in my shattered brain. She felt the cut. She let me do it. I stumbled out of the morgue, completely blinded by my own tears. I ran directly to the chief director's office. I kicked the door open, startling the greedy men inside the room. I killed her. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I made a surgical error. My scalpel slipped and I cut the blood vessel. I covered it up. You have to fire me. You have to call the police and arrest me right now. I am a murderer. I confessed to everything. I demanded to be punished for my terrible, arrogant crime. I wanted to go to a dark prison cell. I wanted to lose everything I owned. The first terrible twist was their calm reaction. The director did not call the police. He stood up and locked the door. Calm down, Arthur. You are just stressed. The director said coldly. The paperwork is already filed. The organs are already transplanted. You are the face of our new charity wing. We are not going to ruin a multi-million-dollar PR campaign because you are feeling emotional. The mistake never happened. They refused to accept my confession. They actively covered up my crime to protect their new, famous saint. I was entirely trapped. I could not go to prison. I could not be punished by the law. The universe refused to grant me the mercy of a jail cell. The final, devastating twist locked me in a permanent nightmare. I am forced to live my perfect, wealthy life every single day. I must wake up in my massive mansion. I must wear the expensive suits. I must smile brightly for the cameras and accept the shining awards for my charitable heart. I am a prisoner in a flawless, golden cage. The terrible burden of the eldest sister, the pain, the sacrifice, and the silent suffering was completely transferred to my dark soul. She died to give me this beautiful kingdom, and now I must rule it while burning in a private hell. Every time I hold a silver scalpel, my hands shake violently. Every time I look at my heavy gold watch, I hear the sound of a cheap sewing machine in the dark. I am the greatest surgeon in the city, but I am permanently, incurably broken. Nora finally rests in peace. But I will live forever with the ghost of the rough, calloused hands that built my throne. I survived the surgery, but my heart died on that cold metal table, bleeding out slowly under the bright lights of my own arrogant success.